The draft evaluation around Kentucky quarterback Will Levis will be a tough one because of a whole bunch of dismay around him during his collegiate seasons, but that dismay could actually make him the perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on this episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget we're free and available on all podcast apps and here on YouTube as well. I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert credential member of the media. It's CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays in Locked On NFL. And here with you every single Monday through Friday and then some on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is our draft profiles episode. We're going to be breaking down Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. Could he be the best fit in the draft for the New Orleans Saints offense? There are certainly some things that are built in already to this offense that would cater to a guy like Will Levis. We'll break that down. We'll also take a look at how, well, he is a fit, but some changes might need to be made around him and how some of those changes kind of have already potentially started. But first, is Will Levis one of the most polarizing players in this NFL draft? I don't even mean amongst quarterbacks. I mean, as an NFL draft prospect, I think the answer to that is clearly yes. There are some general managers out there who go unnamed and say that they believe that he's got, Josh Allen in him, right? Buffalo Bills quarterback. But there are other GMs you can turn around that Todd McShay talked to that also believe that he could potentially be the next Carson Wentz. So there is a huge gap here in between one end of the spectrum versus the opposite end of the spectrum of where Will Levis sits. So because of that could impact things like draft stock, draft sort of positioning and everything. So there's a lot to kind of cover here. So the first thing I wanted to set out to do today is discuss why. Why is it that his draft stock is so volatile right now? Why is he so polarizing? There are a couple of things to consider. The first of which is let's just do the bottom line of who Will Levis is. He's an exciting player. He is a multifaceted run threat at the quarterback position with a huge arm. He's got some issues with his eyes, not the greatest pocket presence, things like that. But what he does with his mobility makes him special. Although, because of all of the changes in the offense around him every single year that he played quarterback, certainly here in 2022, a lot of that ended up being stifled. I mean, you look at the Kentucky Wildcats offense of 2022, and it feels like it held him back. He only rushed the ball 30 times this past season, over 70 the year before that, only picked up 119 rushing yards. He was sacked 36 times by some metrics, 34. I know different places count sacks differently, and I know college football is weird about the sacks. They rein them in as rushing attempts and all these other things. But the Kentucky offensive line gave up the second most sacks of any Power 5 school this year in 2022. So it wasn't just about him holding on to the ball too long, which is an issue, or him, trying to scramble and not being able to get anywhere. A lot of it was kind of the failure of what they called the big blue wall in Kentucky, which was very blue this year, but not very big and not very much of a wall. That's the same program that Landon Young, New Orleans Saints left tackle or offensive tackle, was drafted from. And when he was drafted out of that program, the offensive line was outstanding. Last year, the offensive line was outstanding. This year, not so much. I mentioned that things have changed around him constantly for his 4 years as a college quarterback. He's had 4 different play callers, 4 different offensive coordinators in all 4 years. So he's had different play callers and OCs in each of those 4 years. 2 different ones at Penn State, 2 different ones at Kentucky. That's huge because now you have trouble evaluating this guy because you never saw him in the same system twice. The one thing that you can say is that in 2021 as well as in 2022, he ran pro-style offenses that utilized a lot of sort of the Kyle Shanahan approach. Lots of passes to the perimeter, quick passes as an extension of the run game, trying to get a run game going. They certainly had a good one in 2021, not so much 2022. Another thing that kind of tips the hat to the struggles of the offensive line. An offense that likes to go vertical, but still does a lot of creative things with behind the line motion, pre-snap motion, all of those other things. So he ran a complex enough offense in both of those years. Let me not say complex enough. An NFL version, NFL style offense in 2 straight years. So at least you can take that away. But still, those two offenses were very, very different. A lot more freedom in the 2021 Kentucky offense for Levis than what he had in 2022, which seemed to want to protect him and protect his draft stock a bit and not allow him to run as much. So we saw a big time decrease in his rushing. Accuracy-wise, he hits the thresholds. Remember, the New Orleans Saints, at least in the past, this might change now moving forward, but had always kind of used the Bill Parcells commandments when it came to drafting quarterbacks. There are a lot of those metrics that Will Levis falls short on. Accuracy, not one of them. The metric is basically as long as you complete more than 60% of your passes in your collegiate career, then it makes you a draftable quarterback. He matches that 65.4% of his passes in 2022, never exceeding 66%, which was his best season again in 2021. So he never surpassed that 66%. Excellent downfield, though. Like when you break these down by field position or targeted area, it's pretty clear where the struggle is because he completed 40+% each year, this year and last year, really the 2 years that we're looking for. Didn't even throw 100 passes in 2019 and 2020. But in each 2021 and 2022, completed more than 40% of his passes downfield, 20 or more yards down the field. Completed more than 70% of the passes within the first down marker and line of scrimmage, so 1 to 9 yards. And then completed 80% of his passes behind the line of scrimmage. A lot of screen passes in these offenses that he ran in each 2 years, but completed 59.2 and 59.6% 2021, 2022 between 10 to 19 yards. So struggled in the intermediate area, pushing just beyond the first down marker, but not getting towards the downfield passing. So you can see clearly where the struggles were for him. And that's not out of the ordinary for collegiate quarterbacks. It's not a Max Duggan who, is completing like 60% everywhere but downfield, where he's still completing, I think it was like 50-something% he completed downfield. He was outstanding downfield this year. But this isn't out of the ordinary to see. So the bottom line here is that there are a lot of things to like, a lot of things to kind of question around Will Levis. That's not unusual for a drafted quarterback coming in. The one thing that maybe does kind of raise the most question marks, though, are his injuries. Dislocated finger, also had a left shoulder injury, both of those non-throwing arm, non-throwing hand. Also had a turf toe injury on the left side as well that kept him out for a game. Had a head injury that was kind of compounded with that. Both of those probably actually led to him missing at South Carolina, but you're only going to hear about the toe injury. So there are just certain things around the injuries that you're looking at. He gave a bit of an update to 24/7 at the end of the season, saying that basically his foot feels like he's at about 85% there. The shoulder injury is really just about getting strength back. So he should be okay getting into the 2023, getting into his rookie year, but just something to consider because he is a physical style player. And one of the things that makes him special, although we didn't see it a lot in 2022 because it was kind of hampered, was his rushing ability and how that sort of creates a bit of a change up for him. And I think that's where the New Orleans Saints came up short, honestly, with Taysom Hill. And where Kentucky came up short this past year with Will Levis, you're going to hear a lot of those comparisons over the course of this draft process, is that they tried to take away the changeup and effectively not allow it to be that change of pace. They wanted to, it's almost as if they wanted to erase the run game entirely for Will Levis in 2022, but that's part of what makes him special. What it is that makes him different than Taysom Hill is that for Taysom Hill, the run game and what he can do with his legs is kind of his fastball. That's kind of the best thing that he does. Will Levis is a better passer downfield. He's a more accurate passer, plays with a little bit more anticipation, although still has some of the same issues that Taysom Hill has in the passing game. But he can allow his run game to be the changeup while the fastball is the fastball, if that makes sense. So the New Orleans Saints would have to find a way to utilize Will Levis, which is something that the Kentucky Wildcats didn't do very well in 2022. Could the New Orleans Saints do it in 2023? It might take some changes on the coaching staff, which is kind of true for any of these rookie quarterbacks, but they could get it done. And some of it is already in place. We'll break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Tommy John. Tommy John creating some of the most comfortable underwear, loungewear, and pajamas that you're going to find. And right now, they have their Wrap It Up sale. I love that they call it the Wrap It Up sale. That just makes me so happy. If anybody else is a fan of the Chappelle Show, you know exactly where I'm going with that. But don't let your family be somebody that goes into the dead of winter in old t-shirts or ancient underwear, ratty sweatpants, all that. Instead, help them fight cold with comfy by giving them the gift of Tommy John. That Wrap It Up sale right now is underway. You can give the comfort that you're looking for, the gift of comfort, to everyone on your list, including yourself, of course, with new Tommy John underwear, loungewear, and pajamas. So hurry up over to Tommy John's Wrap It Up sale to get 30% off of everything, plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/locked on. Order now so that your gifts get there before the holidays. Don't be late. 30% off plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/locked on. It's TommyJohn.com/locked on. See site for details. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. New Orleans Saints could be looking at a new quarterback in the NFL draft this year. Will Levis is a pretty good fit. Some might consider him the perfect fit, but it might take some coaching changes or at least some shifts to the offense that could be welcome changes anyway, depending upon the direction that the organization is going. So this could work out really, really well. We appreciate you as always making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today as well, wherever you get your podcast. So for the New Orleans Saints, let's look at the good things that come from Will Levis's evaluation. Some of this is the stuff that we've kind of laid out in that first part as well, but let's recap a couple of the things here. So the one of the big things that is good, the big positive for him, of course, is his mobility. Just not really given the same opportunity to run in 2022 as he was in 2021. Heading over to his rushing information right now. It's always tough to look at rushing for college because college counts sacks as rushing attempts, and they also count sack yardage as yards lost in the run game. So you'll look at some of these statistics and you'll see 72 attempts for minus 107 yards. And that's not fully accurate the way that we look at it talking about the NFL. So when we look at it without the sacks incorporated, he rushed 30 times for about 119 yards in 2022 at an average of only 2.6 yards per attempt. In 2021, 63 rushes, so over 200% increase there, or over a 100% increase, but over 200% of what it was in 2022 for 516 yards, 5.3 yards per attempt. So there were some things that were a little bit different in terms of how they approach the run game, how they utilize it. And some of it was designed runs. They didn't run as many design runs in 2021. You see 15 scrambles. So that means that they only ran 15 designed runs with him, right? So that ends up making a big difference. Whereas in 2021, 35 were scrambles. So about 28 of his rushes were designed rushes. So that makes a big difference in terms of your ability to actually be able to game plan the run as opposed to running on a whim. Again, they forced the run game to be too much of a changeup when he didn't have the fastball in the first place. 2021, they had the fastball in place, which was allowing him to be mobile, but still utilizing him as a passer on the move enough that the run game was still able to be a changeup. So I thought that the way that they designed the offense in 2021 was a lot better than the way that they designed the offense in 2022. And the name behind that is Liam Coen. Remember that name because we're going to be coming back to that here in just a moment. The other things is that he does a lot of really good stuff in terms of his understanding of kind of a modern spread offense, getting the NFL sort of experience in terms of a pro style offense in each of these last 2 years. Lots of good stuff from the running back run game there, particularly in 2021, where their running back had nearly 1,400 rushing yards. They were 25th in the country in the run game there. In 2022, 108th in the run game, averaging just 120 yards per game on the ground. So didn't have as much of the run support in 2022, but had it in 2021. The other things that he has operated that I think are good and that translate well to the New Orleans Saints system, short passes as an extension of the run game. So you see a lot of that. You haven't seen it as much in the New Orleans Saints offense, but certainly they would welcome that back in 2023. Lateral challenges. This is what the New Orleans Saints do all the time. They don't necessarily want to challenge you vertically. They want to stretch you thin on the defensive side. So a big part of that is challenging across the field. They did that same thing in Kentucky's offense. A lot of behind the line post snap motion as well. So you'll see an offset tight end or what you might call an up back or a half back or an H back on one side of the field, snap the ball, they go into a split in motion behind the line of scrimmage, which gives you a potential passing option over that side, gives you a potential lead blocker over on the pull side or the motion side, all of that. That's something the New Orleans Saints use a ton in their offense as well, particularly with guys like Adam Troutman and Nick Bennett. Also see a lot of pre-snap motion. I think the Saints could use a lot more of that. And then you also saw this Kentucky offense run at an NFL pace. What I mean by that is that they averaged somewhere around 36 seconds off of the play clock every single time before they took a snap. And they would oftentimes take the snap with 4 or 3 seconds left on the clock, as opposed to that sort of upper or higher pace offense that you see in Alabama, which inflates numbers, not inflates numbers, right? You still have to produce, but you get a lot more plays in out of a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud than you do from Will Levis. So that impacts why the numbers can look different as well, for the sheer number of plays that they run. Therefore, passing opportunities that they get are hugely differentiated. And so that tends to tip a little bit more towards the NFL game, which isn't necessarily a pace game like the collegiate game is. So that would be one big adjustment that a lot of young quarterbacks have to make that Will Levis wouldn't necessarily have to make. Running a huddle, coming out of that huddle, getting to the line of scrimmage with, breaking the huddle with 14 seconds left on the clock or whatever the specific team's rule is, getting to the line of scrimmage, getting the snap off before the play clock goes to zeros. A couple of the bad things that you're watching that you want to see him sort of improve upon are things that, again, the Saints have managed before because they did so with Taysom Hill. Pocket presence isn't great. A lot of his eyes dropping down, right? So you're trying to look upfield. You're keeping your eyes up, all of that, but your eyes are dropping down to your offensive line. Then that ends up getting you in trouble. Again, the bad play of the offensive line in front of him has a big time impact on that. Again, that eye discipline being kind of number 2 actually within the pocket presence, of not really being able to feel pressure until it's there. And then the third one is throwing late. We've seen a lot of this from Taysom Hill. We've seen a lot of it from Andy Dalton. We've seen some of it from Jameis Winston as well. So this has been a consistent issue for New Orleans Saints quarterbacks. This has been a bit of a concern for Will Levis's game as well. Is just getting the ball out late. Wanting to step up a little bit too much when he does step up, wanting to, getting that extra hitch in there, waiting a little bit longer for the receiver to be open as opposed to throwing the receiver open, all of that. One of the biggest arms in this year's draft, absolutely no doubt about it. But sometimes he kind of in that intermediate area is off on the timing of how to manage that arm strength to that specific area. So what does that mean that you need more of? You need to be able to move the pocket, a lot more play action, things that end up moving the pocket with you, those sort of rollout situations. That's something that he actually sort of didn't have much of in 2022. You saw 147 dropbacks. 35.7% of his passes came on play actions. 2021, 2022, you saw that drop to 27.4%, just 92 of those dropbacks. So less than 50 or more than 50 fewer in 2022 than what he ran in terms of play action in 2021. That's more than a quarter drop off there. So that's a big one to watch out for, and a big reason why maybe the efficiency and the sort of productivity wasn't there for him in 2022. And it's not that wasn't working, by the way. They averaged 11.8 yards per attempt in play action. They just didn't run it very much. So you'd want to see more of that. You need good offensive line play, which he didn't have, unfortunately, in Kentucky. He might have in New Orleans, depending upon any changes or whatever happens and whatever they do over the course of the offseason with that unit, how Trevor Penning comes along, all of that. And then you need a creative play caller. So this is where the name Liam Coen comes back. Liam Coen, who is right now the offensive coordinator over in Los Angeles for the Rams, was with the Rams for a few years as their receivers, like an assistant coach working with the receivers, then ended up getting an offensive coordinator position with Kentucky in 2021, had a fantastic year with them, led them to a 10-win season, had some, built some of the greatest stuff out of Will Levis and found all of it, but then ended up leaving, going back to the Rams as their offensive coordinator. So Liam Coen, I want to circle that name because the potential investment in Will Levis in this year's draft could be earlier signified by a potential move for the New Orleans Saints on their coaching staff. And Liam Coen is one of those names to watch. There's a lot of rumors floating about where he's headed, but could the New Orleans Saints get back in on that conversation? We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by Total Wines and More. This holiday season, find what you love at Total Wine and More. You can find the one real easy. I go to it all the time over in Metairie to get what it is that I'm looking for. Things like Uncle Nearest whiskey. Some of my favorite wines are over there as well. So it's so many great bottles to choose from. It's easy to find. Maybe you've got a favorite Cabernet, maybe a Cab Sauv, maybe you've got a favorite Chardonnay. I like Riesling myself. I'm a dry white wine guy, but whatever it is that you're looking for yourself, or maybe you're looking for perfect gifts for everyone else, you're going to be able to find it with the help of a friendly guide. Customer service unmatched over at Total Wine and More, and all the confidence that you need knowing that you're going to be able to find something special at the lowest price. Don't pay more when you don't need to. Head over to Total Wine today. You'll love what you find. Only Total Wine and More will give you curbside pickup. They've got delivery that's available as well in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Drink responsibly. Be 21. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Is Will Levis the perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to quarterback in 2023? Maybe not right now, but he could be based on coaching changes. So here's how we kind of embark on almost every one of these rookie quarterback conversations, right? That the Saints would have to make some type of adjustments of how they approach offense in order to really be able to support these quarterbacks. Guys like Hendon Hooker might need a little bit of his collegiate offense to travel with him, the receiver options, the half-field reads, things like that. But certainly something you can do. Kyle Shanahan did it with guys like Jimmy Garoppolo, the half-field reads, maximizing that, taking that all the way to the Super Bowl, and maybe one overthrow short of what could have been a huge game for Jimmy Garoppolo and the San Francisco 49ers in the big one. But you can see where the New Orleans Saints already have some of the things, especially like the receiver options and things like that are already built in for Hendon Hooker. This is kind of the same situation with Will Levis, is that there's already a sliver of the playbook, which is kind of the Taysom Hill game plan, and now the Andy Dalton game plan, which doesn't factor in the mobility, but the pocket passer-ness of it all. And then all of a sudden, you have something that you can build off of to make a creative offense around a Will Levis, who is going to be a little bit more of a comfortable pocket passer, though has some steps and strides to make there than what you've seen from Taysom Hill in the past, but that has better downfield accuracy, better arm strength as well than Taysom Hill, and better arm strength, I think I would dare say, than Andy Dalton as well, and very good downfield, all of those other things. The extra piece is that you also get the counterpunch of Will Levis, which is what he can do with his mobility, with his legs, kind of the X factor, just like with Hendon Hooker. Both of these guys can be pocket passers, or can be, even if you have to move the pocket for a Will Levis a little bit more, get him involved in the play action game, things like that. But he can be a little bit more of a natural quarterback for you with the counterpunch of the run game added to it. So how do you create an offense that best supports all of that? I don't think, based on anything that you've seen so far in 2022, that you're going to be able to build it with the current staff, unless you make a big time shift. And I think that shift, as I've mentioned before, is probably coming at offensive coordinator, or at least play caller anyway, going into 2023. You've got to build an offense that is a little bit more diverse, that's a little bit more creative. We've seen sort of situations to where, I'm thinking about a couple of plays that I've seen in Kentucky's playbook, to where you have an H-back on the left side, you have a running back on his left hip. He's taking a snap out of the shotgun. He fakes the handoff to the running back and then throws a pitch to the H-back that's coming across the backside of the formation. Situations to where they move the pocket on a screen pass, to where they literally get him off the snap, motioning towards the outside, and kind of a boot action, maybe a little bit of like an abbreviated boot action, but then turns and goes across the field to the opposite side to the screen game. So he's pulling the defenders away with him that could come in and sort of make the play from underneath the screen. So those types of creative pieces, kind of, again, the Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan kind of wide zone offensive approach that has found its whole way around the entire NFL. We've seen it with the McVay system. We've seen it with, the Green Bay system. We've seen it, with Ben Johnson. Like, we've seen it so many different places that there are those coordinators out there that can build an offense around a guy like this, and that can build something that's a little bit more creative, that allows you to be able to utilize all the different motion behind the line of scrimmage to be able to confuse, throw off, open up lanes, create mismatches, all of the things that we're kind of accustomed to seeing the New Orleans Saints do with their West Coast / Air Coryell blend Sean Payton offense, but move it into modernity away from what we have seen sort of get reeled back so far this season. Like, I think the other piece that you look at within all of that is also still allowing Will Levis to be Will Levis and utilizing his legs, which we have seen now with the approach from Kentucky's current staff, that's not the case. They haven't really allowed him to be the runner. We broke down those numbers a moment ago. So this is where kind of that Liam Coen conversation comes in. Could the New Orleans Saints, who were interested in him before, entice him to New Orleans with the promise of going after Will Lutz in the draft? It's hard because you got to do it in a certain order, right? You got to get the coach first and then you go and get the quarterback. So it kind of signifies what the New Orleans Saints would be interested in. Or they find someone in the Liam Coen mold that can end up continuing, or that can end up coming in and helping there. The reason why you kind of have to get this done before the draft is because A, the draft is forever away, but then also B, Liam Coen's rumored to, at the end of this Los Angeles Rams season, to be headed back to Kentucky to be their play calling offensive coordinator again. So they're looking to revitalize kind of that Kentucky offense, the Coen approach to that Kentucky offense. So could you keep him from leaving LA for Kentucky and convince him to leave LA for New Orleans? The key thing being play calling. Like I mentioned before, he's not calling plays in Los Angeles, and he ain't ever going to call plays in Los Angeles as long as Sean McVay's there. So if you bring him to New Orleans, you give him an NFL paycheck, he gets to be an NFL coordinator at the NFL level, and he gets to call plays for an NFL team as opposed to for a collegiate team. And then, of course, pay and all these other things end up being a big part of that as well. But if not Liam Coen, then you find somebody that is familiar with the spread offenses, the wide zone offenses, and you bring them in. And again, you thrust this New Orleans Saints offense into today's era. And you can do that with a quarterback with mobility that has a higher floor than we tend to think about mobile quarterbacks. And you do it by changing the offensive system to an attacking offensive system, which we've seen from this New Orleans Saints team for years and years and years, but one that's shaped and built around what we know works in the NFL right now today. And then, of course, the other option is you get Sean Payton back, and then all of a sudden Sean Payton's calling plays for Will Levis, and Will Levis is a little bit of an upgraded but younger version of what he loved about Taysom Hill. So there's also that route as well. But again, I don't think that that's as likely as making changes at coordinator and moving forward into next season. So we'll see how it is that it all unfolds. Liam Coen, big name to watch over the course of the offseason. Does he head back to Kentucky? Does he stay in LA? Does he head elsewhere? That would be something that, with the New Orleans Saints' previous interest and their potential interest in a guy like Will Levis, that would be a place where they could potentially go, which would help to open up this offense massively in 2023. And you just got to find the right quarterback that can support it. And Will Levis could potentially be that guy. But there are other quarterbacks that I know you like. There are other quarterbacks that I like in this draft as well. We broke down Hendon Hooker. Now we've broken down Will Levis. Next quarterback I want to look at is Max Duggan out of TCU. Could another TCU quarterback be an option for the New Orleans Saints? That's what we'll look at in our next NFL draft profile. But coming up in our next episode, we're taking a look at players that we haven't really talked enough about. So we'll look at some of those players like Alontae Taylor over on the defensive side, Caden Ellis over on the defensive side. But what about some of the guys that we haven't talked about at all that could be returning to this team, like Smoke Monday, DeMarco Jackson, and others? We're going to break all of that down in our second episode today on Locked On Saints. Make sure you catch that later. I appreciate you as always for making this episode and every episode every day here on Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports today as well. Get all the news you need around the world of sports from the Locked On local experts. Around 20 to 25 minutes, available wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, a part of your routine for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.